We believe ruling is a divine privilege, a path to glory and immortality. But history teaches us a darker truth. Behind the gold and the marble, the throne is a cage built from paranoia, betrayal, and blood. At the top of the world, no one can hear you scream. Today, we will reveal the 10 most brutal, ironic, and tragic deaths of emperors and kings. These are not stories of how they lived, but how they truly died. And the death of number 1 changed the world completely. This is The Immortals, where legends never die. Subscribe and take your place in the ranks of legends. From Rome to Sweden, the causes of death varied. A bullet, a fever, 100 daggers. But the result was always the same: a sudden violent end to absolute power. Let's begin our countdown of history's 10 most tragic deaths, starting with an emperor who believed he was a god. Position number 10, Caligula, the Mad Emperor. Caligula entered power beloved by Rome. But everything changed after the mysterious illness of 37 AD. Ancient writers insist he died and came back different. His moods flipped violently. He suffered sudden hallucinations, and his paranoia turned every minor disagreement into a potential threat. But the most dangerous shift was his new belief that he wasn't just emperor, he was divine. He ordered temples built for his worship, demanded sacrifices in his name, and forced high-ranking priests to perform rituals treating him as a living god. He even tried to place his statue inside the Temple of Jerusalem, a move so explosive it nearly triggered a mass revolt. Inside the palace, his relationship with the Praetorian Guard collapsed fast. He punished officers for trivial reasons, forced them to run beside his chariot for miles, and used humiliation as entertainment. One officer, Cassius Chaerea, received the worst of it. Caligula mocked his voice, insulted his masculinity, and assigned him the most degrading ceremonial duties. Chaerea hid his anger behind obedience, but he was quietly gaining allies. By early 41 AD, senators, guardsmen, and palace servants were united by one fear. Caligula's whims were becoming unpredictable enough to threaten the empire itself. The conspirators waited for a moment when he would be isolated from loyal soldiers. They found it during a short walk through an underground passage after a series of games he had forced the court to attend. Caligula was relaxed, joking, completely unaware. Chaerea gave the signal and struck first. Others followed, stabbing the emperor between 20 and 30 times. The attack was so fast that nearby guards assumed it was part of a performance. To prevent any possible heir from claiming the throne, assassins immediately found and killed his wife, Caesonia, and his young daughter. Do you think Caligula was truly insane, or simply a tyrant with no limits? Position number 9. Charles XII of Sweden, the Lion of the North. Charles XII wasn't a king who watched battles from a distance. He lived like a soldier. He slept on the ground, ate barely anything, and refused to stand behind the front lines. Officers begged him to stay back, but he always placed himself where the danger was greatest. This earned him absolute loyalty from some and growing frustration from others who saw Sweden breaking under his decisions. By the early 1700s, the kingdom was collapsing. Years of non-stop war had drained the treasury. Farms were empty, and thousands of soldiers were dead or missing. Sweden's enemies were getting stronger, but Charles rejected peace talks every time. In his mind, retreat wasn't an option. A king must attack until victory or death. His generals privately warned him the army couldn't endure another campaign. He ignored all of them. In 1718, he launched one final gamble: the siege of Fredriksten in Norway. Conditions were brutal. Freezing rain turned trenches into mud pits. Soldiers wrapped rags around their feet to avoid frostbite, and enemy cannons fired almost daily. Yet Charles continued inspecting front-line positions personally, even at night. Witnesses said he moved calmly through gunsmoke as if bullets didn't apply to him. On November 30th, the routine broke. Charles approached the forward trench to observe troop movements. Without warning, a single bullet passed cleanly through his head, entering near one temple and exiting the other. Soldiers nearby saw him fall, but never heard a gunshot from the fortress. No muzzle flash, no sound, nothing. And the bullet itself? vanished. It was never recovered. The angle of the wound and the silence surrounding the shot fueled a theory that has never died. The bullet may have come from behind Charles, not from enemy lines. Some of his own officers were desperate to end the war that was destroying their country. After his death, discipline collapsed almost instantly, as if many had been waiting for this moment. If you were one of those freezing, exhausted soldiers, would you call it enemy fire or an inside job to end a hopeless war? Position number 8. Aurelian, the emperor destroyed by a rumor. Aurelian became emperor at a time when Rome was barely a single empire at all. The West had broken away as the Gallic Empire, and the East had formed the wealthy Palmyrene Empire. Most rulers talked about restoring unity. Aurelian actually did it. In less than 5 years, through relentless campaigns, he defeated both breakaway states and forced them back under Roman control. Because of this, later historians called him Restitutor Orbis, the restorer of the world. But victory came with a cost. Aurelian ruled with discipline so harsh that even loyal officers feared him. He punished corruption instantly and personally executed soldiers who stole from civilians. During campaigns, he ordered beatings for officers who disobeyed orders, and he dismissed commanders without warning. Many respected him, but very few trusted him. Inside his staff, the idea that one mistake could lead to death became part of daily life. This fear created the perfect environment for disaster. Aurelian's secretary, Eros, had been caught forging signatures. Terrified of the emperor's reaction, he tried to save himself by creating something worse, a forged list naming several top generals as traitors, supposedly marked for execution. He planted it where the officers would find it. They read the document, saw their names, and assumed the worst. With Aurelian's reputation, they didn't doubt it for a second. While Aurelian was preparing a campaign against Persia, the generals confronted him on the road near Caenofrurium. They didn't ask questions. They didn't allow explanations. Convinced their lives depended on striking first, they surrounded the emperor and stabbed him repeatedly until he collapsed. Only after his death did they investigate the document and discover it was a lie created by a frightened secretary trying to save himself. The empire had killed the man who had just saved it. Aurelian reunited Rome and crushed its enemies. In an empire built on fear, was trusting a piece of paper the general's fatal mistake? Position number 7. Qin Shi Huang, the immortal who was poisoned. Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China, unified the warring states and then fixated on a single goal, erasing death from his future. Terrified of assassination and aging, he dismissed traditional doctors and surrounded himself with alchemists, wanderers, and self-proclaimed magicians who promised access to hidden realms and mystical cures. He funded massive missions to the eastern seas, searching for mythical islands where immortal beings supposedly lived. Some expeditions vanished entirely, yet he interpreted every disappearance as evidence that they had succeeded. Inside the court, alchemists worked non-stop to produce elixirs of eternal life. Their formulas were dangerous: liquid mercury, cinnabar, toxic minerals, and heavy metals believed to preserve the body by stabilizing the spirit. Qin Shi Huang took these mixtures for years, convinced each dose brought him closer to immortality. Historical records describe tremors, irrational outbursts, and sudden changes in behavior. Clear signs of mercury poisoning long before anyone realized the danger. During an imperial inspection tour, his condition collapsed. He suffered violent convulsions, vomiting, and intense delirium. His skin darkened and swelled as the poison overwhelmed his system. Within days, the emperor who claimed he could cheat death died inside his traveling carriage. His ministers feared that revealing the truth, that the immortal emperor had been killed by his own medicine, could fracture the empire. To hide the smell of the rapidly decaying body, officials ordered cartloads of rotting fish to follow the carriage. Soldiers complained about the stench, but no one suspected it came from their emperor. The journey continued with fabricated orders issued in his name, until the court reached the capital, only then revealing his death. Qin Shi Huang risked everything to never die. How far would you go in the pursuit of eternal life? Position number 6. Napoleon Bonaparte, the Forgotten Emperor. After controlling most of Europe, Napoleon ended his life on a volcanic rock in the South Atlantic, St. Helena, one of the most isolated points on Earth. The British placed him under constant surveillance, guards outside his residence, restricted movement, and every letter censored. He wasn't treated like a diplomatic prisoner. He was treated like a man whose return could destabilize an entire continent. His daily life shrank into a strict routine. He spent hours dictating his memoirs, determined to shape how history would remember him. He walked the island's rough paths alone, studying the terrain as if planning a campaign he would never lead. His health deteriorated steadily. Chronic stomach pain, swelling in his legs, and repeated episodes of weakness that his doctors could not explain. Modern analysis of preserved hair samples shows high levels of arsenic, far above normal environmental exposure. At the time, arsenic was common in pigments, wallpaper, and even wine, but the concentrations found in Napoleon's hair suggest prolonged ingestion. Whether accidental or intentional remains disputed. Several members of his entourage later claimed he was being slowly eliminated to prevent any possible return to power. By early 1821, his condition collapsed. He suffered violent vomiting, internal bleeding, and severe stomach inflammation. Witnesses described him doubling over in pain, unable to stand, drifting in and out of consciousness. The British medical team diagnosed stomach cancer, the same disease that had killed his father, but the symptoms matched both natural illness and arsenic poisoning. On May 5, 1821, after a night of delirium, he spoke his final recorded words: France, armée, tête d'armée. France, the army, the head of the army. He died far from the battlefields he once dominated, guarded, monitored, and effectively erased from European politics. Do you think Napoleon died of natural illness, or did someone want him gone for good? Position number 5, Nero, the monster of Rome. Nero ruled the Roman Empire with the conviction that he wasn't just emperor, he was a misunderstood artistic genius. He forced senators, soldiers, and citizens to attend his endless performances. People collapsed from exhaustion inside packed theaters, but leaving was forbidden. Guards blocked every exit. Ancient historians like Suetonius recorded that some people pretended to faint just to be carried out, while others quietly took their own lives rather than sit through another of Nero's masterpieces. His obsession grew as criticism increased. He traveled through Greece competing in singing contests he always won. When he returned to Rome demanding applause, the Senate had reached its limit. The Praetorian Guard, tired of his paranoia, executions, and humiliations, finally abandoned him. Overnight, Nero went from absolute ruler to a fugitive with a death sentence issued by the very senators who once bowed to him. Panicking, he escaped with only 4 loyal companions. Witnesses described him trembling, crying, and repeating that he could not live without art, as if losing an audience hurt more than losing an empire. He hid in a villa outside Rome while patrols searched for him. When he learned he'd been declared a public enemy, condemned to be beaten to death in the Forum, he realized he had only 2 options: execution or suicide. Nero tried to gather the courage to stab himself. He held the dagger, pressed it to his throat, and froze. The man who had ordered countless killings could not take his own life. Hearing horsemen approaching, he panicked again, begging his secretary Epaphroditus to help. With Nero shaking uncontrollably, Epaphroditus guided the blade into his neck. Nero's final words were recorded as, "Qualis artifex perio." What an artist the world loses in me. Even at the end, he thought like a performer facing his last audience. If an emperor forced you to sit through hours of his singing, what would you have done? Position number 4, Ivan the Terrible, the king hunted by his own crime. Ivan IV was already feared for his violent mood swings, but everything changed the day he struck his eldest son during a furious argument. The blow split the Tsarevich's skull. Ivan's scream afterward was heard across the palace, but the damage was irreversible. He had killed the heir he desperately needed, and instead of stabilizing him, the guilt broke something inside him. After that day, Ivan became trapped in a cycle of paranoia and rage. He saw betrayal everywhere, among nobles, servants, even within his own guard. He claimed to see demons in his room, accused advisors of witchcraft, and regularly launched into violent outbursts. His fear of conspiracies intensified the existing system known as the oprichnina, a state within the state. Ivan had previously divided Russia in two, the ordinary land and the territory personally controlled by his black-clad oprichniki, who had authority to raid, torture, and execute anyone Ivan suspected. Thousands died under this system of engineered terror. The Tsar himself participated in the violence. He rode with the oprichniki, supervised interrogations, and kept detailed lists of enemies, real or imagined. But despite all the brutality, he remained terrified of assassination. He changed rooms constantly, slept surrounded by guards, and tested his food obsessively. The man who ruled with absolute authority lived like a prisoner of his own mind. Ivan's end came unexpectedly. While playing chess in the Kremlin, witnesses saw him lean forward as if studying the board, then collapse instantly. For centuries, the cause was debated. When his remains were analyzed in the 20th century, researchers found extraordinarily high levels of mercury, far beyond what was used in standard medicine of the era. The most likely explanation? Deliberate poisoning. It's still unclear who may have orchestrated it, boyars, foreign agents, or even someone within his own household. But after a lifetime of violence and paranoia, Ivan may have finally fallen to the very threat he feared most. Do you think Ivan was truly insane? Or did he always know exactly what he was doing? Position number 3. Alexander the Great. When Alexander returned to Babylon, his body was already breaking down. Years of non-stop campaigning had left him with a pierced lung, a crushed leg, deep head wounds, and a chest injury from an Indian spear that almost killed him. Despite this, he kept pushing himself harder than his troops, marching wounded and refusing rest. By age 32, he carried the physical damage of a lifetime of war. Then came the sudden decline. After a banquet, he developed a fever that escalated quickly. Over the next days, he lost strength in his legs and struggled to move, but remained fully conscious. Ancient reports describe sharp abdominal pain, rising temperature, and progressive paralysis. Modern scholars suggest malaria, Nile virus, typhoid, pancreatitis, or Guillain-Barré syndrome, which perfectly matches the pattern of a man mentally alert but trapped inside a failing body. Poisoning is often suggested, but most toxins of that era acted too fast or left obvious symptoms not mentioned by ancient sources. For 11 days, Alexander lay unable to speak. His generals visited expecting instructions, but he could only respond with small gestures. With no clear successor, political maneuvering began inside the palace while he was still alive. Some backed his half-brother Aridaeus, others wanted to wait for Roxana's unborn child, and several commanders argued for dividing the empire immediately. The power struggle started before he even stopped breathing. When Alexander finally died, chaos erupted. Another detail fueled his legend. His body reportedly did not decompose for days, unusual for the heat of Babylon. Greek writers portrayed this as proof of semi-divine status. Modern explanations suggest that if he suffered from Guillain-Barré, he may have appeared dead while still alive, delaying any visible decay. His death without naming an heir triggered the Wars of the Diadochi, which shattered the empire he spent a decade building, showing that his final silence changed history as much as any of his victories. If you were Alexander, who would you have named as heir? Position number 2. Julius Caesar, the dictator for life. On the morning of March 15th, 44 BC, Caesar received multiple warnings. A slave tried to hand him a note naming the conspirators. A soothsayer repeated the same message he had given earlier. Beware the Ides of March. Even Calpurnia, his wife, begged him not to leave after dreaming he was covered in blood. But Caesar dismissed it all. He believed his political enemies lacked the courage to act, and that his popularity made him untouchable. Inside the Senate, the conspiracy brought together men who hated him for completely different reasons. Cassius feared Caesar's growing power and believed the Republic would never return while he lived. Brutus, once protected and promoted by Caesar, was convinced he was acting for the greater good of Rome, or at least convinced himself enough to justify betrayal. Decimus Brutus, trusted by Caesar, joined out of pure ambition. Others were motivated by personal losses. Caesar had stripped some of power, denied offices, or humiliated them in public. This wasn't a unified rebellion. It was a coalition of resentments. The chosen location, the theater of Pompeii, was symbolic and strategic. Pompey had been Caesar's greatest rival, and the Senate met there temporarily while the Curia was under renovation. The conspirators believed that killing Caesar at the foot of Pompey's statue would send a message. The Republic was striking back. When Caesar took his seat, they closed in around him, pretending to present a petition. Tilius Cimber grabbed his toga, pulling it down to expose his neck. The first stab came immediately. Caesar tried to defend himself, but the attackers were too many. He was struck 23 times, though only one wound, piercing his chest and lung, was actually fatal. Ancient sources say that when Caesar saw Brutus among the attackers, he stopped fighting. He covered his face with his toga and fell at the base of Pompey's statue, drenched in blood. Ironically, the conspirators believed they had saved the Republic. Instead, they triggered civil wars that destroyed it. Within a generation, Rome became an empire under his adopted son, Octavian. Which side would you have chosen, Caesar or the conspirators? Position number 1. Constantine XI, the Marble Emperor. By the time Constantine XI took the throne, Constantinople was already a dying fortress. The Theodosian walls, once the strongest in the world, were cracked from earthquakes, patched with dirt, and far too long for the remaining soldiers to defend. Gunpowder was so limited that some cannons fired only once per day, and the army was barely an army at all. Around 7,000 defenders facing more than 80,000 Ottomans, supported by giant artillery, and a siege meant to erase the last trace of Rome. Constantine knew survival was impossible. He sold the imperial jewels, melted gold from abandoned palaces, and accepted volunteers from anywhere, even men with criminal records. At night, he walked the walls himself, carrying stones, checking breaches, and helping reinforce weak sections. He acted not like a distant monarch, but like a commander preparing for the final stand of his people. The decisive assault came on May 29, 1453. The first Ottoman waves were chaotic, the second more organized, but the third, the Janissaries, broke through a damaged section near the gate of St. Romanus. Defenders fell back, formations collapsed, and fires spread inside the city. The fall of Constantinople was no longer a threat. It was unfolding in front of him. Realizing the empire was finished, Constantine removed his purple cloak and imperial insignia. Witnesses said he declared he would die with his people, then charged into the fighting as an ordinary soldier. He battled hand-to-hand with no guards and no escape. His body was never identified with certainty. Some said it was found beneath a pile of janissaries. Others believed he disappeared entirely in the final chaos. This is the #1 most tragic death among emperors and kings because Constantine XI didn't just lose a throne. His death marked the end of a civilization. He was the last Roman emperor, and his fall closed a story that had begun more than 1,000 years earlier. His final act wasn't surrender. It was a deliberate choice to die defending the last breath of Rome. If you enjoyed this journey through the most tragic imperial deaths, make sure to leave a like, share your thoughts in the comments, and tell me which ruler shocked you the most. And if you want more epic history, don't miss Top 10 Most Powerful Armies of the Ancient World, now available on the channel.